A very good Thursday morning to you, and I hope I find you very well. Here in Manchester today, the trend kind of continues, although the last couple of days we've had a little bump in the road of a very nice early summer, but we've returned to very nice blue skies and a little bit of sunshine. Lovely and warm outside, so hopefully they should get some play today down at Queen's. This is going to be my final EU Brexit referendum video prior to the important vote on the 23rd of June, so a week today, and hopefully a lot of people will watch this, and hopefully a lot of people will be interested in it, and hopefully find what I have to say interesting. As you may or may not be aware, over the last week they are the government of the day, and those who are not the government of the day or who are in opposition but are in agreement that we should remain in the EU, have been pushing out even more politics of fear, things which will push those who are as yet undecided as to which way they're going to vote to fall on the side of the Remain campaign. The thing that I find quite interesting is that Jeremy Corbyn, who is the leader of the opposition Labour Party at the moment, who has been a very, very left-wing politician, socialist-based, I guess you would call it, for all his career, including in that being totally 100% adverse to the EU, has suddenly swapped sides and is now firmly planted in the Remain campaign, and is now saying that it would be ill-advised for we, the Britons of this funny little rock in the North Atlantic, to vote to leave the European Union. Now, that strikes me as odd for somebody who has had a lifelong belief, let's say somebody who's had a lifelong belief that these little machines that we wear on our wrist are the greatest thing you can possibly spend your money on, and then all of a sudden, overnight, decide that I'm quite happy to check the time on my phone and I don't need these anymore, so I'm going to sell up. That's how radical this change is. So what has happened there? You know, in my opinion, perhaps what has happened is that somebody has come along and said, Jeremy, if you enter the fold of the Remain campaign, we will ensure that a large wheelbarrow filled with £50 notes will arrive at your front door every morning for the rest of your life. Or more likely, what has happened is that he has been offered a guaranteed peerage, that when he leaves office as an MP, both as leader of the opposition and also as his constituency MP, he will become a lord and take his seat in the upper house. I think you'll probably find that that is the more likely version. But either way, for somebody who had a lifelong belief that Europe wasn't a particularly great idea for us here in the UK, for somebody to change their mind that way seems a little bit suspicious. Yesterday we had George Osborne, the devil incarnate, come out and say that should we leave the EU, there would have to be an emergency budget, because it will have such a massive catastrophic effect on the monetary situation here in the UK. And although that budget actually hasn't arrived as yet, what he did say was that immediately an extra 2p would have to go on income tax. So 2% extra would have to go on the income tax, everything that we, the working people of Britain, have to pay, everything we earn. How does he know that? I have no idea, but he is Chancellor of the Exchequer, so I'm assuming that he's cleverer than me. And also he's basically saying that should we leave, it would leave a £30 million black hole in the services budget of the UK. Now, I find that quite difficult to get my head around, because if we leave the EU, at the moment we are paying in to the EU £350 million per week. And I appreciate that figure doesn't include our rebates, which I think is about 10 to 20 million pounds a week we get back, plus any revenue we get back from the EU. But I did mention some figures in my last EU video, so check that. But as I said in that video, figures are very, very hard to come by, even if you go to the Office of National Statistics here in Britain. If there is a £30 million black hole in the EU budget, in the UK budget, if we leave the EU, we will stop paying the 350 million. But surely at that point we're still 320 million to the good. Or am I wrong? Because 350 less 30 is 320. I think my maths are right there. Let me know if I'm wrong. So the politics of fear still is going strong here in the UK, and especially now that it seems that the Leave campaign seems to be gaining traction here in the UK. I think the Remain campaign are being a little bit nervous about what could possibly happen this time next week. But what I want to talk about today is a slightly different take on what the EU, if it carries on as it is and will turn into this super state, it will mean for Britain and indeed for the rest of Europe. Between 1939 and 1945, there was this little thing called World War II. You might have heard of it. And the point of World War II was that there was this gentleman called Hitler, and his view was to unite Europe under one flag, ruled by a central governmental body based in Germany. We would all have the same policies, we would all have the same legislation, we would all have the same transport regulations. There would be a universal currency for us all to use under this one-party system. Now, many countries went to war to stop this happening, and the war was won by the people who didn't want that to happen. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here. What we went to war for between 1939 and 1945 sounds very, very reminiscent of what the European Union is trying to put together here. One supercontinent, one currency, under one flag, under one government, not in Germany this time, in Brussels and Strasbourg, where the two administrative centres are. Now, you bear in mind that we went to war. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of people were killed to stop this happening in those 6 years between 1939 and 1945. And yet nobody out there seems to be drawing this parallel between what is happening now and what happened then. And maybe that's because this is a peaceful invasion, as it were, a peaceful takeover. There's been no call to arms, and maybe they're trying to get it through without people noticing that what they're actually trying to do is exactly what the German Reich were trying to do in 1939 to 1945. So that's something else, a different standpoint on it, which has become clear to me over the last couple of months as I've been thinking about this. What I want to talk about as well is a gentleman called Jean Monnet. He's a French gentleman. He was known in the 20th century as being a very, very forward thinker, a very advanced thinker in the realm of European and global politics. He's also known as the father of Europe. He had the idea before anybody else that the bringing together of all European states could be a very, very good idea because it would make it easily governable. You would basically have one government providing laws and regulations for everyone throughout not only continental Europe, but to anybody else who they could bring in to the fold. In 1952, he wrote a letter to a friend. And I've taken out of it a very important passage, which I will read for you. So bear in mind, this is for a gentleman called Jean Monnet, known as the father of Europe, to a very close friend of his. And this is from a letter he wrote in 1952, and I quote, "Europe's nations should be guided towards the superstate, without their people understanding what is happening. This can be accomplished by sensitive steps, each disguised as having an economic purpose, but will eventually and irrevocably lead to a federation." And that letter was sent on the 30th of April 1952. So his idea was that we were all led by the nose, ignorantly, towards this European superstate. Or each step will be put to us by making us think that it will be economically beneficial to us, all the European countries, and therefore, of course, as long as it's going to be economically viable and economically beneficial to us, we're of course going to accept that and go along with it. So he's going to lead us through step by step until we all fall into line, until we've been led as if by the Pied Piper into this European superstate, or as he says it, a federation. And in my view, it will become at some point the European Federation, or the United States of Europe. And that's what will happen. And even back in 1952, by a man who is known as the father of Europe, he was planning this. And this is what is now coming into force. We are seeing this happen, these gradual steps, changing in 1973 from the common market, where we were assured by Edward Heath here in the UK, that it's solely for trade. That's all it is. They are banishing tariffs and levies but for trade within continental Europe and Britain, and between Britain and continental Europe. So the cost of doing business will be less. And then later on, when we got to 1975-76, where it changed to the EEU, the European Economic Union, so the term common market had gone and the EEU had come in, and then we moved along until we get to today, where it's just the EU, the European Union. So the terms of common market, which influences trade, and the word economic has now been taken out. We're now a union of European nations, and we will be taken further, where they will try, obviously being very, very successful in this, that most nations now on continental Europe have the euro with one standard rate of exchange, which is great for strong economies, not so great for poorer economies. So you've got all these people under that one flag who are being dictated to by Brussels and Strasbourg, and all have this one economic currency now. And there are only a few people resisting. Britain is one of them, and hopefully more will resist as time goes along. But if this carries on, as I say, the EU will change and it will become the European Federation. And federation, the word federation to me always sounds a little bit iffy, even though I am a great fan of Star Trek, you know, and we have the Federation there, which is a good thing. But I don't think the European Federation will be a particularly good thing for everyone, possibly for Germany and the more powerful nations in the actual main continent of Europe. So it just goes to show that they have been leading us down a particular path for 60 years now. So none of this is new. This is all part of a plan to bring together all these countries even that are separate by their own lifestyles and languages and heritage. And people are also separate by geography. We here in Britain, a funny little rock in the North Atlantic, we are geographically separate. We are separate in every way, and the mentality of island dwellers is always separate. You only need to speak to island dwellers to understand that. Speak to an Icelander, speak to somebody from Greenland, speak to somebody from Malta, and those kind of places. We are all different to somebody who lives in a large landlocked mass. So I think where I'm going with this is, whoever's watching this, if you are undecided and you live in the UK, a week from today, the 23rd, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, please vote. Please vote. I never vote, as you know, but this time I feel so strongly about this that I am going to vote. So please vote, and please vote leave. What is going to happen is that we, as Great Britain, the United Kingdom, will be sucked into this European superstate, and our individuality as a nation will be lost. And we will be forced to abide by rules, laws and regulations which are not made here in Britain by our own elected MPs. The final thing I will say, and things are changing, the European Court of Human Rights, an interesting one, because I know that Simon Crane touched on this yesterday. The European Court of Human Rights got involved in a dismissal case of an employee who was sacked from his job here in Britain. What happened was, the employee, foolish, which you'll understand when I tell you the story, put a post up on some form of social media. So I don't know whether it was Facebook or Twitter or whatever it was, basically saying that his job was dreadful, the company where he worked for was a joke, and his line manager was an absolute tosspot. His employer got to know about this, and he was sacked. The employee went to an industrial tribunal who said that the messaging on the social media was solely the business of the employee, and the employer had no right to bring that forward as proof of dismissal, because the person was doing their job very well and within the terms of their contract. The person got their job back. The employer then went to the European Court of Human Rights. The European Court of Human Rights overturned the British Employment Trustee Journal and basically said that the employer was correct, and made a Europe-wide ruling that any social media posting that any employee of any company makes in work time can be read by the employer, and if that post says anything which is denigrating the company for which they work, it will be grounds for dismissal. So that gives you an idea of what this European Court of Human Rights is doing. Where are the human rights of the individual? They are supporting the big boy, the company there. So that employee is now out of a job again. I don't know whether he's got any right of appeal, but they made a ruling which is now Europe-wide. So that goes to show that this European body can overpower the industrial tribunal here in Britain to make that ruling, and not only a ruling in that particular case, a ruling which will cover all employees from all countries and companies. Interesting. So that's really where I want to bring this to a close. I think this is something which will make life far worse for us. Maybe not in my lifetime, but certainly for our children, our children's children, should we decide to remain. It will be something that will strip us of our homemade legislation. It will strip us of our individuality. It will strip us of everything that we are as people from individual countries, especially if the country in which we live is an island anywhere, because we are geographically separate. So if you don't normally vote, please vote. on the 23rd, and please vote to leave. We do not want to be part of a federalist Europe. People died between 1939 and 1945 to stop a very, very similar thing happening. Please do not let it happen solely because this is a peaceful takeover. Thank you very much indeed for watching this one. I do hope that you find this one interesting. If you have found it interesting, give it a thumbs up. Share this. Please share this on any account that you have. Get it out there on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. Let other people actually see this. If you have any questions, queries, what you think the ramifications are going to be of the EU, what that's going to turn into over the years, what influence that is going to have on very independent states that are islands. Let me know. Let me know what you feel. So that's it for this one, people. Thank you very much for watching. I've not checked my figures today because my internet is down. Obviously, it will be back up by the time I post this. So I will speak to you very, very soon. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye-bye for now.